The first time Daniel Harper fell asleep standing up, nobody noticed. Not the passengers rushing through the late-night subway station. Not the cashier at the convenience store where he bought the cheapest coffee on the shelf. Not even the security guard who nodded at him every night when he entered the towering glass, building downtown carrying a mop bucket and a tired smile. Daniel only realized it happened because he woke with his forehead against the elevator wall and tears burning in his eyes from embarrassment. 3 jobs, 1 little girl, and not enough hours in a day to survive them both. By morning, he delivered groceries. In the afternoon, he repaired small appliances out of his cramped apartment for neighbors who couldn't afford professional repairs. At night, while most of the city slept, he cleaned the 43rd floor of one of the biggest tech companies in Chicago. None of it was enough. Not after the hospital bills. Not after his wife, Melissa, lost her battle with cancer 8 months earlier, leaving behind silence so heavy it felt permanent. The only thing that kept Daniel moving was 7-year-old Sophie. Sophie with her tangled curls. Sophie who still set 2 plates at dinner, sometimes by accident. Sophie who whispered good night. Mom toward the ceiling every evening before bed. Daniel never corrected her, because sometimes he whispered it too. That Thursday night, exhaustion clung to him like wet clothes. His hands ached from carrying grocery crates all morning. His back screamed every time he bent to lift another trash bag. The fluorescent lights above the executive offices buzzed softly as he pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway. The building was quiet except for keyboards clicking somewhere in the distance. Some employees stayed late, chasing deadlines and promotions. Daniel chased rent. He stopped outside a conference room and rubbed his eyes. Inside, a massive digital screen flickered strangely. Blue. Black. Blue again. At first he ignored it. Not his job. But then he noticed something else. A faint burning smell. Daniel frowned. He stepped closer. Years ago, before life collapsed into overdue notices and hospital visits, Daniel had worked as an electrical systems technician. He'd been good at it, too. Really good. Until Melissa got sick and he started refusing overtime to care for her. Then came missed promotions. Then layoffs. Now he cleaned floors where people half his age earned 6 figures. The burning smell grew stronger. Daniel opened the conference room door carefully. The screen connected to the wall server was overheating. A tiny spark snapped behind the panel. His pulse quickened. If that system shorted completely, it could fry the entire floor network. He glanced down the hallway. No IT staff. No managers. Nobody. For a moment, he hesitated. If he touched company equipment and made things worse, he'd lose the only stable paycheck he had left. Sophie needed winter boots. Her school had sent another reminder about unpaid lunch fees. He could not lose this job. Another spark popped. Daniel made the decision. Quickly, he unplugged the overheating backup unit, removed the damaged cable connection, and rerouted the secondary power supply before the heat spread deeper into the server rack. His movements were instinctive, precise, like muscle memory waking from years of sleep. Within minutes, the flickering stopped. The burning smell faded. The system stabilized. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then a voice behind him said, "How exactly did the janitor just fix a problem my senior engineers couldn't solve all week?" Daniel nearly jumped. A tall man stood in the doorway wearing a dark coat and an expression somewhere between confusion and disbelief. Daniel recognized him immediately. Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Dynamics, the kind of billionaire whose face appeared in magazines and business podcasts. Daniel straightened awkwardly. "Sorry, sir. I noticed the overload issue." Ethan walked to the screen, staring at the now stable system. "That server has been crashing every night for days." Daniel wiped his hands nervously on his uniform. The backup regulator was cycling too fast. It overheated the relay. Ethan blinked once. Then again. "You diagnosed that in under 5 minutes?" Daniel shrugged softly. "Used to work in systems maintenance." "Used to? Life happened?" The answer hung heavily between them. Ethan studied him carefully for several seconds. Most executives never really looked at janitors. But Ethan noticed everything suddenly. The exhaustion beneath Daniel's eyes. The wedding ring still hanging from a chain around his neck. The shoes with worn soles. And despite all of it, the quiet dignity in the way he carried himself. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. "Daniel Harper." "Well, Daniel Harper, you may have just saved this company hundreds of thousands of dollars." Daniel gave an uncomfortable laugh. Just trying to help. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next night, Daniel arrived at work to find a small paper bag sitting on his cleaning cart. Inside was a hot turkey sandwich, fresh fruit, and a handwritten note. "You forgot dinner yesterday. Try not to do that again. EC." Daniel stared at the note for a long moment. Nobody had noticed him skipping meals before. Nobody. The nights after that became strange in unexpected ways. The broken vacuum cleaner in storage mysteriously got replaced. Someone approved overtime pay for the cleaning crew during a snowstorm. The vending machine suddenly became free after midnight shifts. People whispered that the CEO was making random operational changes. Nobody knew why, except Ethan had started staying later and watching, not from suspicion, from curiosity. One evening, Ethan found Daniel sitting alone in the cafeteria repairing a little pink backpack zipper with a screwdriver from his pocket toolkit. "Daughter?" Ethan asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "Sophie, 2nd grade." Ethan sat across from him. "You fix everything?" "Not everything." Something about the answer carried deeper meaning. Ethan leaned back quietly. "I read your employment file." Daniel tensed immediately. "You were an electrical systems specialist for nearly 12 years. Before my wife got sick." "What happened?" Daniel stared down at the backpack zipper for a moment. "Cancer happened." The room fell silent. "When Melissa started treatment, somebody had to stay with Sophie. I turned down travel assignments, then promotions. Eventually they replaced me." Ethan nodded slowly. "No pity, just understanding." "My father worked 3 jobs," Ethan said quietly. "People think I built everything alone because magazines like dramatic stories. Truth is, my father nearly killed himself keeping our lights on." Daniel looked surprised. Ethan smiled faintly. "He cleaned office buildings too. Something shifted between them after that. Not employer and janitor, just 2 exhausted men who understood sacrifice. Then came the snowstorm. The worst Chicago had seen in years. Half the building staff called out. Daniel still showed up. Because missing one shift meant choosing between electricity or groceries. Near midnight, alarms suddenly blared across the 43rd floor. A major heating system failure. Temperatures dropped fast. Pipes risked freezing. Servers risked shutting down. Panic spread among the remaining overnight staff. Engineers scrambled. Managers shouted over phones. And somehow, in the middle of the chaos, Daniel noticed the real problem before anyone else did. A pressure valve in the lower mechanical room had jammed shut. Simple. Hidden. Catastrophic. Without waiting for instructions, Daniel grabbed tools and ran downstairs. Freezing water sprayed across the floor when he forced the panel open. The metal pipe burned icy cold against his hands. He worked fast despite numb fingers. One wrong move could rupture the entire system. Upstairs, employees watched monitors fail one by one. Then suddenly, the heat roared back. Systems stabilized. Lights flickered steady again. A cheer erupted across the operations floor. Daniel sat on the mechanical room floor breathing hard, soaked to the bone. That was where Ethan found him. "You saved the building," Ethan said quietly. Daniel laughed weakly. "Guess I saved the cleaning shift." But Ethan's expression didn't change. "No," he said. "You saved people's jobs tonight." The following Monday, Daniel was called into the executive conference room. He almost wore his only tie, then decided against it because the coffee stain wouldn't come out. When he entered, 6 executives sat around the table. Daniel immediately assumed he was being fired. Instead, Ethan stood and slid a folder toward him. Inside was a formal employment offer. Senior Facilities Operations Manager. Full salary. Benefits. Stock options. Flexible hours. Daniel stared silently at the numbers, convinced he misunderstood them. "I can't," he whispered. "You can," Ethan replied. "I don't even have the right clothes for this room." Ethan smiled slightly. "Good thing we're not hiring clothes." Daniel's eyes filled unexpectedly. Not because of the money, though God knew they needed it. Not because life might finally become easier, but because for the first time since Melissa died, someone saw him again, not as invisible, not as broken, not as the janitor, as a human being. 3 weeks later, Sophie visited the office for the company holiday party. She held Daniel's hand tightly as employees greeted him by name now. Real smiles. Real respect. At one point, Sophie looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "You smile more here." Daniel swallowed hard. Across the room, Ethan noticed. He walked over carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "One for Sophie." "One for Daniel." Sophie grinned. "Daddy says you're the boss." Ethan crouched slightly to her level. "Your daddy's the reason this place still works." Daniel looked away quickly, emotion catching in his throat. And for the first time in a very long time, the future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something waiting patiently for them. Something warm, something human. Something earned through every exhausted night he refused to give up.